What a beautiful day. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It feels like the first Sunday of spring anyway out there. It's wonderful. Well, remember the Age of Aquarius? Remember the new age? I don't know, this crowd may be a little young to actually remember it, but maybe you've heard of it in any case. Well, I think of it as having its main expression starting in the 60s and then really expressing in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And I experienced it really as a time of expanding peace, love, and understanding in the outer world. There was a rising tide of consciousness that seemed to be lifting a lot of boats around the world. And we could see what seemed to be the transformation of consciousness that was taking place globally. In the song, The Age of Aquarius, it said, "When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars together. It is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius." Okay. Well, you're older than you look, I guess, because a lot of you seem to remember that song. Well, I am not an astrologer nor a philosopher, but I am a New Thought minister. And while there was always some confusion, New Thought and New Age seem to get kind of jumbled up. They are clearly two different things. But this period of time also saw a strong expansion of New Thought, including science of mind and unity. I remember back when Eric Butterworth was on Oprah's show, and Oprah held up his book, Discover the Power Within You, and she said, "This book changed my life." And it was the first of many interesting interviews that Oprah's done through the years. Well, it's true that I graduated from college in 1971 and became a teacher of Transcendental Meditation in 1974. And a Unity minister in 1990. So this was all kind of in the midst of this Age of Aquarius stuff. And we seem to be on a trajectory to a transformed world where barriers were coming down, war no longer seemed relevant, the spiritual evolution of the planet seemed to be underway. We had a whole genre of beautiful New Age music. We had the harmonic convergence and the world peace meditation, which, by the way, Unity and Center for Spiritual Living still conduct that around the first of the year. We had the human potential movement and the rise of personal growth, meditation, yoga, finned horn, holistic health. I thought it might be fun to share with you a few names and expressions that might ring a bell from that period. Louise Hay, Celestine Prophecy, Ravi Shankar, Gaia, Ramtha, Paradigm Shift, Rebirthing, Intentional Community, the Tao of Physics, Edgar Cayce, Ram Dass, Psychic Fair, Conversations with God, Feng Shui. I remember when every bookstore that you would walk into had a New Age section. You remember when there were bookstores out there? I thought this morning about possibly burning some sandalwood incense, but I thought it might set off the smoke alarm and wouldn't be such a good idea. We had the end of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Union, and Brezhnev, who was the head of the Soviet Union at the time, said, quote, "The world is entering a new age." The number of democracies in the world rose significantly in the second half of the 20th century. And by the way, it has actually fallen off since 2010. We had significant progress in the rights of women and minorities and indigenous people. We inaugurated Earth Day, and it seemed like there was a new sense of consciousness for the ecology of the planet. We took the technology of the Second World War and used it to go to the moon, which recently I saw an interview of somebody who said that they felt that was technologically, that was the greatest accomplishment in the history of humankind. Now, was some of it kind of hokey and overcooked? Well, yes, sure. But also there was a lot of that was exciting and inspiring about that period. And to a significant degree, love was in the air. So where do we find ourselves now in terms of the outer world? Well, we seem to be deep in an era of, frankly, of cynicism and fear. Kind of the time of a glorification of the ego. We now have the arming of American citizens with military weapons and shootings in primary schools. We're dealing with climate change, maybe a new Cold War, a troubled economy, and possible pandemics. Who could have thought we'd see another war in Europe? We've gone from movies like Close Encounters and E.T. and Starman, where the people from the aliens were benevolent and loving, to movies about horrible monsters from outer space and zombies. And it seems like we have a new level of hostility in our communication. Today, if you went on Twitter to promote love in international relations, you'd probably get ripped to shreds online. So what happened? And where are we going? Where is the world going? Was all this talk about a new age of peace, love, and understanding a mirage? Was the growth in consciousness a delusion? Well, I think not. And I've spent some time thinking about it because, frankly, I miss it. I miss all of that. We went to hear the tribute band for Peter, Paul, and Mary recently. And frankly, I was moved. And I don't think it was just nostalgia. There was something about the message that they were sharing that touched me. So I would like to share with you my point of view about this. This lesson here today might seem a little like you're in a classroom. I hope that's not too great an extent. But I remember a teacher once saying, "Don't start a talk with a disclaimer." But there it is. But in any case, hopefully there'll be something in here. This is my take on things, and hopefully it's something that you'll find something in it for you. I do believe that the human race is evolving spiritually on a soul level, and that we are moving in the direction of a more enlightened era when individually and collectively we will be living at a higher level of consciousness. However, I also believe that this progress is not made in a smooth and steady line. The world is a classroom for our souls. It's one way to look at it anyway, and it's a very dynamic classroom. I believe that progress is made in stages and steps, and there is the swing of a pendulum in this progress. As Abraham might say, we are getting a taste of contrast right now. The swing of the pendulum could simply be characterized as a swing between love and fear, light and shadow. Well, Clay, if you put that first, you put it up already. Clay did a wonderful job with these slides. After I submitted this to Clay, I thought I probably could have put this upside down, because now, rather than going down, I think what it is that we're moving up. But let's just imagine if we took a look at history over the past couple of thousand years, if it might be seen in this perspective. What I called here the Age of the Masters was really the time when Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad all came into the world. There was a period of about 1,000 years when they all made their appearance, shifting consciousness on the planet in the direction of love and light. And during that period, the democracy of Greece rose and fell. The Republic of Rome rose and fell, and there were some great philosophers, artists, and scientists during this period. It seemed like civilization was making a great step forward. Then there was a period which has been described by some as the Dark Ages, when arguably the pendulum swung back, greater repression and religious limitation, and throw in the Black Plague. Then the pendulum swung the momentum of the human race into the Renaissance, at least in the Western world. I can't say much about what was going on in India and China at the time because I don't really know. But here again, there was an apparent expansion of art, culture, religion, and political life, and ultimately the rebirth of democracy and the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The early 1800s saw quite a bit of conflict, but the second half of the 1800s saw the beginning of new thought and the beginning of the influx of Eastern spiritual luminaries and teachers into the West. And it kind of culminated with the Parliament of World's Religions that took place in 1893, which was really quite a milestone. Then came the first half of the 20th century. And once again, it seemed like the pendulum swung back. Now, none of this is all clear-cut and 100% one way or the other, but the fact of the matter is that the first half of the 20th century was the most violent in human history, with as many as 100 million people dying in 2 world wars and new weapons of mass destruction being developed. But out of that first half of the 20th century came the swing to the second half of the 20th century, and this is what we're going to characterize as the dawning of a new age, of an age of Aquarius. Call it that, call it whatever you will. It seemed like a remarkable evolution, expression of the evolution of consciousness. In this period, we saw the emergence of several legitimate spiritual luminaries. In my view, this includes Krishnamurti Yogananda, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Ramana Maharishi, Vivekananda, the Dalai Lama, Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Michael Singer, and perhaps many more who are not well publicized, or maybe they're in an ashram or out in the woods someplace even today. Maybe they're doing the landscaping on your neighbor's yard. We don't know where all the illumined and enlightened people are today, but there's also been some noteworthy channeled material, including the Course in Miracles and works from Emmanuel and Abraham. There was also some important re-examination of Christianity, especially in the expansion of new thought, and a lot of Western interest in Buddhism and Hinduism. In my mind, there may never have been such a concentrated surge of spiritual light into humanity and history as there was during, say, that roughly 50-year period that was the second half of the 20th century. There were also significant social figures like Gandhi and King. But out of this surge, there was bound to be a swing back of the pendulum. And so here we are today with a lot of sobering developments. Although, first I would like to say that from my perspective, the spiritual momentum, while it may seem to have stopped, I believe it is still there. The momentum is there. It is just in a more quiet form that isn't quite so obvious. And I would like to share a perspective on this spiritual process of growth that the world seems to be going through. So first I'd like to talk a little bit about Hegel. As I said, I am not a philosopher, but I would like to talk about a framework of understanding that was initiated by the German philosopher Hegel. And first I'll give you this quote that's up here, but it's from Wikipedia. How's that for a source? In the idealistic philosophical theory of the German George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis are 3 phases of an evolutionary process of the human spirit that repeats itself in search of truth. I'm going to just repeat the part of that and say the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis are three phases of an evolutionary process of the human spirit that repeats itself in search of truth. Now, I confess that I've tried reading some Hegel, and I have not gotten very far. I'm pretty lost in it, but one thing I think we can take from it is this three-step process applied to spiritual evolution. First, a thesis arises. So a thesis is basically an idea. It's a new idea. The dictionary says that it's a statement of or concept put forth for discussion or proof. Here, I think what we can think of this thesis as a new expression of the truth, a new idea about the truth. Well, let's apply this to Jesus as bringing his thesis into the human life wave when he did. And we could debate exactly what the nature of his thesis was, but I would suggest that it boils down to basically this: God is love, we are one with God, and the kingdom of heaven is right here. Second stage of this process is called the antithesis. So what happens when this new thesis arises, this new idea arises, is that which is unlike it tends to rise up. That which contradicts this thesis tends to push back. And in this case, let's say with Jesus' teaching, pushes back with fear and opposition. We could think of it really as the reaction of the ego pushing back, and it does its best to crush the message and the messenger. And of course we know that Jesus is crucified and his followers are fed to the lions. But next comes the synthesis, according to Hegel. Out of the clash between the thesis and the antithesis comes the synthesis, a new step. In the case of Jesus, the seed of his message survived and merged with what was left, from my perspective, as I'm characterizing this, what was left of the Roman Empire and Western civilization, and became a religion that was called Christianity. That's what I would call Christianity the synthesis in this process. And it was not a pure expression of Jesus' thesis, but it was a step forward in the evolution of human consciousness. So I would submit to you that a new age is still on the horizon. Call it a golden age, a new age, the Age of Aquarius, whatever you might want to call it. The process is underway. I see the thesis of the new age as essentially the same one that Jesus was giving us, although it was sort of clothed differently, packaged differently. Maybe we could say that it came across as love, freedom, and the spirit within. And this message emerges on the human scene with a significant impact. Now, this thesis expressed itself in many ways, and some of it, we know, some of this New Age stuff was a little mixed up, but it was a powerful concept overall to transform lives and societies and consciousness. But the antithesis, the antithesis, was inevitable. So does New Thought have a way of talking about this phenomena? Well, I believe that it does. In Unity, it's described in the book Lessons in Truth by Emily Cady. And in both Unity and Science of Mind, it's called chemicalization. I'd like to read to you something from a religious science book. Thank you, John. It goes like this. Inevitably, along this path of awakening and healing, we bump into periods where small and limited patterns rise to the surface that we may release and let them go. Dr. Ernest Holmes called this process of release chemicalization. These periods of sweet release, although divine blessings, do not always feel good. In fact, they are often accompanied by restlessness, agitation, disharmony, and discomfort. And then a direct quote from Ernest Holmes: "Love is within us. It cannot be destroyed. It cannot be destroyed. It can be ignored. To the extent that we abandon love, we will feel it has abandoned us. Denying love is our only problem, and embracing it is the only answer. Through the power of love, we can let go of past history and begin again. Love heals, forgives, and makes whole." So, what I'm proposing here is that an infusion of truth, a message of truth, into the consciousness of a person or a collective consciousness initiates an initial surge of love and joy and life. But the old belief system, the old consciousness gets stirred up by this and energized. In a sense, the old unillumined ego that has been in charge senses a threat to its control, and it reacts. And may result in fear and negativity. But as Emily Cady explains, as we persevere in the consciousness of love, we find ourselves ultimately in a higher place than ever before. And I believe in that quote, Ernest Holmes is saying exactly the same thing. And I think these frameworks can help us to understand something about what's going on in the world today. The human race is evolving spiritually, and it's doing so at an ever faster, more rapid rate. So the question might be, well then, if that's the case, what is it that is ours to do today as we see this pendulum swing? Well, I believe it's an important time. We don't know how far the pendulum is going to swing. Maybe it's already started to swing back. I'd like to think so. When we look at the world, we may be discouraged and tempted to be afraid and angry about how things are going and allow our hearts to shut down. But this is the time to take heart and know that this is simply a stage in a process that is ultimately lifting us up and lifting the consciousness of the entire human family. I think, to some degree, we can all influence the swing of that pendulum. I think it's a time when we are perhaps should be careful not to get too caught up in what is going on out there in the world, and to instead be more caught up in what is going on within ourselves. This is a time to stay centered and allow life to flow, to stay in the moment to the best of our ability, and to the best of our ability, love what is. The universe, life, spirit, is ultimately in charge. We can trust that there is a greater good unfolding, call it what you will, and that there is a sublime good that is here today and every day, right now. And if we let fear overrule love, then we become part of the problem. But if we persevere in love, then I believe we're shortening the swing of that pendulum and helping to lift us into the next synthesis, into the next rising tide that will lift boats all over the world. Well, I invite you to join with me as we take this into prayer for a moment. Let us be reminded that whatever may be taking place out there in the world, the truth is that there is one presence and one power. We are one with it. It is the light of love. As we center ourselves in this peaceful presence. Then we are supporting this evolutionary process. We are supporting the process of Spirit's transformation of the world and lives all over the world. And so it is with open hearts and open minds that we embrace the day, the moment, the presence. And with open hearts and open minds, we allow the world to move as it moves. And we are open and receptive to the love that is present, that unites us and that moves through us, changing lives and changing the world. Thank you, God. Amen.